So my grandparents, I was very close to my grandparents growing up. I think because, I was my mom's parents. I'm close to my other grandparents too, but especially them. I think that we just had a special bond because I was like the first grandchild and, just kind of the way everything happened. And then it was like when I was born, it was like, they were just like, okay, like
how could we? Yeah, this is a gift.
Meant to be, but it was very hard. And so my grandparents, I gravitated towards them. So when I was 13, I moved in with them.
Oh, okay. So and was that helpful? Like,
yes.
Yeah. And before that were you having custody split between?
Yeah.
parents?
So I would go to my dad's on the weekend. So I lived with my mom and my stepdad, and that had a very bad ending. So I couldn't live there anymore. And then I ended up going and moving in with my dad, which me and my dad have been close like my whole life.
Yeah.
Like we were always close. I just never lived with him. But he was always there. And I think I moved in with him and his wife at the time, Christy, my stepmom, love her, great person. But she was very young as well. And I think they had their new marriage and my new sister, they just had a baby. And then this 13-year-old kid randomly moved in.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like
a visitor in this family's house. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I got there, it was like my dad was, she was in law school and my dad was also finishing school. And they were still building their careers. So they didn't at that time make very much money. And so when I moved in, my cousin Tommy was actually living with my father in the room that I would stay in. So I didn't have a bedroom for an entire year. I lived on a couch
That's really
for an entire
At that
year.
age too,
and then
which
you don't
is
feel like you have a
super-
space to
Oh,
belong.
it was
Yeah.
so which I think nobody that's kind of crazy because no one even knows that about me. I didn't even remember it until just now.
Yeah.
Honestly.
We
But
block things out.
not
Yeah, we
having
do.
a room, which so many kids, so many people experience
Right.
constantly.
Yeah,
was
there are a lot of people who
insane.
deal with that, right? But
It was I didn't have a place to be.
and
or,
how old were you at this point?
I was 13.
So you're at that age, you're going through becoming a little woman, and you're living in this. That's really hard to not have your own space to feel
Privacy.
things in privacy.
I had just switched. So in the middle of my freshman year was when I switched. And I switched from the high school, all the people I grew up with, to this other town called Pearl River.
Wow. So you were switching homes and schools.
Yeah,
and
so I knew no one, knew nobody,
Wow.
didn't want to leave my other school, was already depressed about that.
Did you stay in contact with friends and stuff?
Yeah, only really one, my best friend Sophia. We're still best friends to this day. She just moved out here with me.
Okay.
That's my best friend. We
That's
stayed in
cool.
contact, but that's pretty much it. So yeah, during that time of my life, I mean, it was dark. I mean, it was, but for some reason, I just stayed positive,
Yeah.
and I kind of didn't really let it define me.
Yeah.
I definitely had sad times. I definitely had, struggles from that. And I think really what so after that, I moved in with my grandparents basically.
Yeah.
I kept going over there because it was close to my dad's, and I would always kind of go over there after school. And then it kind of turned into, and then I eventually got my room at my dad's. So it's not it wasn't anything out of his control. My dad's great. And he's always been there for me. But I think for me, I needed that motherly, he's my dad, that's my homie, he's the best, he is loving, but I needed that motherly
Connection,
connection. And so I ended up kind of moving in with my grandparents, and my dad was kind of sad about that because he's like, well, you don't want to stay, what am I? And I was like, it's nothing personal, I just feel more comfortable with my grandparents. And so I ended up moving in with my grandparents, and I think I also felt guilt.
Yeah.
Because I felt okay, they already raised their kids. I don't want to be a burden.
And did you feel guilt sort of also because your dad was?
Yeah, I felt guilt because of that. But he understood, and I think I also it wasn't anything wrong. It was just I felt out of place. I did not feel like I belonged anywhere.
Yeah.
It was just it was an odd feeling.